everybody, and welcome to another episode of Hope in the Time of Corona. My name's Sophie and I'm on the staff team at Hope Church. And today we are continuing our series in the book of Judges. We're on week 8 and so far we've looked at the lives of Barak and Othniel and Ehud and Deborah and Gideon. And today we are going to be spending some time thinking about Jephthah, about his life and his leadership and his mistakes, and what we might learn from him. And as we do that, we're going to ask ourselves 3 questions. Are there any idols that you worship? How has God used your experiences to equip you for where you are today? How does culture impact your understanding of God? So that's where we're heading, and we're going to be looking at the passage Judges 10 verse 6 to Judges 12 verse 15. And as that's quite a lengthy amount of Judges, I'm not going to read it on this talk, but it might be that you want to pause me now to read it. If not though, that's absolutely fine. It's not essential for watching this talk or joining us at 11 o'clock for our post-sermon debrief. And alongside that, I'll also be referring to Judges for You by Tim Keller a few times, which we've been looking at as a church alongside the book of Judges itself. But before we look specifically at Jephthah, I want to think more generally about the Israelites and this cycle that we've seen played out time and again already in this series. So the passage that we're looking at starts pretty predictably. We read, again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. They served the Baals and the Ashtoreths and the gods of Aram, Sidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of the Ammonites and the gods of the Philistines. As we know, this isn't the first time that the Israelites have turned away from God, and unfortunately it's not the last either. We see this cycle, which we've referred to throughout these talks, played out again. They violate the law. They're occupied by enemies. They cry out to God for help. God sends them a judge to deliver them. Yet they violate the law again. And I don't know about you, but I find myself thinking, again, really? But Tim Keller challenges this. He says, it is easy to see the futility of this in Israel from our vantage point of a different era and culture. But human hearts have not changed. They still assure us that when an idol leads to slavery, what we need is more of that idol. And that leads me on to our first question. Are there any idols that you worship? And what I mean by this is anything that has a hold on you. Some examples might be money or social media or shopping or success or reputation or image or status. Anything that you find your value and your identity in. Anything that deep down you know that you place too much importance on. Like the Israelites, although we might know that time and again it hasn't led to that sense of fulfillment that we're looking for, we go back for more. That actor Jim Carrey is quoted as saying this: I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so that they can see that it's not the answer. Whether it's money or social media or shopping or success or reputation or image or status or something else, we can often think that more is the answer. Tim Keller says we see our problem not as worshipping an idol, but not worshipping an idol enough. This is something that I'm sure we all struggle with on some level, because we are all human, and this is a human reaction, it's a human response, it's a human emotion. But I believe that we should bring those idols before God, and we should pray that they will lose their power, because I believe that they can lose their power. And we should remind ourselves of where our true identity and value and fulfillment come from as beloved children of God. Are there any idols that you worship? So once again, the Israelites have violated the law by worshipping other gods. They're then occupied by enemies and they cry out to the Lord for help. And it's here that we meet our next judge, Jephthah. Like Gideon, Jephthah is described as a mighty warrior. And he had a pretty difficult upbringing. He was the son of a prostitute. He was an illegitimate child. And his father, Gilead, had sons born of his wife. And they drove Jephthah out of the family, out of his home, because they didn't want him receiving any inheritance of their father. They wanted to keep it all for themselves. They didn't feel that he deserved it because of the way that he had come into the world. So Jephthah left his family and his home, and he basically adopted a life of crime. The passage says that a gang of scoundrels gathered around and followed him. And I kind of like that phrase, a gang of scoundrels. They sound like quite a fun group. Jephthah became an outlaw, an outcast, a criminal. And it is Jephthah, this outcast, outlaw, criminal, that God raises up to rescue the Israelites. Tim Keller says, Jephthah does not simply rise to be a judge despite his rejection and suffering. He is fitted to the role through his background. He is a shrewd negotiator and a great fighter. Had he been raised in comfort and ease, he never would have become anything like this. His life prepared him and it qualified him to bring salvation. And there are two reasons why I love this. The first is this. Jephthah isn't disqualified from being used by God because he hasn't lived an honest or a righteous life because of his life of crime. That didn't disqualify him. And Jephthah is equipped for the role of judge because of his upbringing and his experiences, not despite of them. I'll say those 2 points again. Jephthah isn't disqualified from being used by God because he hasn't lived an honest or a righteous life. And Jephthah is equipped for the role of judge because of his upbringing and his experiences, not despite of them. Time and time again, we see God throughout the Bible and throughout history using imperfect people for his plan. And that gives me hope because I am an imperfect person and you are an imperfect person as well, and we still get to be used by God. Whatever we have done, however we have lived, we will never be disqualified from being used by God. And that is good news. And while we might feel that some of our experiences feel like scars that we carry, they carry pain and hurt, we can know that while God never causes those experiences, he can use them, he can redeem them and bring good from them. And this brings me on to our second question. How has God used your experiences to equip you for where you are today? And finally, I want to consider a very dark part of Jephthah's story, which Tim Keller describes as the terrible vow. And if you've read the passage, you will know what's coming. Jephthah vows that if God gives the Ammonites into his hands, he will sacrifice as a burnt offering the first thing that comes out of his front door of his home when he returns in victory. And God gives him total victory. Of course, he gives him victory. And when he returns home, the first thing, or the first person, I should say, that comes out of the front door of his home is his daughter, his only child. He tears his clothes with grief, and he says to her that he's made a vow to the Lord that he can't break. And she says, can I have 2 months to mourn my impending death? And after that, Jephthah fulfills his vow. And I know that we have said a number of times that Judges is a hard book, but this feels like a new level. What on earth is going on here? Well, the most important thing for us to take away is that this was not God's will. It was not God's will. Deuteronomy 12:31 states that human sacrifice is detestable to God. So why did Jephthah make this vow, and why did he fulfill it? Well, he did it because he was deeply influenced by the culture around him. And with that culture, the culture's understanding of the pagan gods that they worshipped, the idols that they worshipped. Those beliefs that stemmed from his immersion in culture lived alongside his beliefs that stem from his relationship with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And those two sets of beliefs lived together and became confused. It was understood in that culture that you could bargain with and buy off a pagan god with human sacrifice. And it was believed that you could earn a pagan god's favour. But God didn't want Jephthah's vow. He didn't want him to fulfill it at all. He'd already chosen to give him total victory. He didn't need that bargain, and he absolutely did not want him to fulfill it. What does this teach us today in the 21st century? Well, this is an extreme situation that feels worlds apart anything we might experience today. But there is one thing that hasn't changed, and that is our immersion in culture. And we can sometimes find that culture and our relationship with God and what we know of God live alongside one another, and those two things become confused. And one example for me in my life would be the idea of works and the idea of grace. I know full well that I am saved by grace. I know that good news that the gospel brings, that there's nothing I can do to earn God's love and his forgiveness and his salvation. Yet, sometimes I find that I live in a way that feels more led by works rather than led by grace, a way that somehow feels like I can earn God's love, which is not at all true, and I know that deep down. I'm leading Alpha at the moment, and we're journeying through the Alpha film series, and on week 3 we looked at forgiveness, and one of the hosts of the film series said this: Jesus has paid the price. All you have to do is accept the free gift. It's not like buy one, get one free. It's more like buy none, get everything free, which sounds too good to be true. I don't know about you, but if I hear buy one, get one free, I practically feel like I'm saving money. I need to get in that deal. But buy none, get everything free, that feels too good to be true. It feels like there must be some small print with a little caveat explaining what I actually have to do to get everything free. And that's just one example of where my beliefs, which stem from culture, live alongside my beliefs about God, and they become confused, and then I can start believing something about God or living in a way that just isn't true from what I know of him deep down. And that's just one example. I'm sure there are many other examples in my life, and I'm sure you can think of some in yours as well. Tim Keller writes, "We are mostly far more affected by our culture than by the Bible, and more affected by our culture than we think." And that leads me to our third and final question. How does culture impact your understanding of God? So whether you are joining us at 11 o'clock for our post-sermon debrief, or whether you will be doing this in your own time, I would really encourage you to spend some time thinking about the following 3 questions. Are there any idols that you worship? How has God used your experiences to equip you for where you are today? How does culture impact your understanding of God? Have a brilliant rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching. Maybe see you at 11 o'clock to discuss this together. Bye.